and welcome to the Cogito Design channel. This is the first video in our new series where we interview designers in order to help share advice and inspiration on how to develop your own board game. Today's video features the legendary Jamey Stegmaier, co-founder of Stonemaier Games. Stonemaier Games have consistently published some of the best games in our hobby, including Scythe, Viticulture, Tapestry, and Wingspan, to name a few. Jamey not only designs and produces games, he's also well known for sharing his wisdom in his regular blog and YouTube channel. Jamey is author of a crowdfunding strategy guide, which many consider to be the go-to textbook when launching a crowdfunding campaign. It's safe to say that the board game scene would be considerably poorer without Jamey's multitude of contributions. And we know so many people, including ourselves, who have benefited from his knowledge and creations. So, we feel very honoured that we were able to sneak in a few interview questions to his famously busy schedule. Jamey is a world-renowned expert in this field, and we are certain that his answers to our questions can help you on your design journey. So, without further ado, let's hear from Jamey himself.
So when I start designing a game, it is really, it depends on what the game is. For all of my games, I have a different inspiration, whether it's a mechanical idea that comes from another game that I'm playing or that I pull out of the blue, or it might be a thematic idea that comes from a book that I'm reading, a movie that I'm watching, might come from an existing IP, like for Red Rising, or Scythe. That world was starting to be built at the time that I discovered it. So theme, IP, sometimes it's art. Art was really the focus for Scythe, or mechanisms. But for me, right away, once I have that idea and I actually sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper and I start brainstorming, the theme and the mechanisms get mashed up right away. Like if it's a mechanical idea, right away I'm trying to think, okay, what themes make sense for this? Because I can't design in a vacuum. I need those themes to inform what the mechanisms will turn out to be, and vice versa. If I have a thematic idea, right away I'm asking what mechanisms make sense for this theme, and then I'm bouncing back and forth between theme and mechanisms. So for me, it really goes back and forth between the two almost immediately when I start brainstorming. There are a number of game mechanisms that I have not used yet in any of my games that I love and that I would love to use someday. Although I consistently see with these mechanisms that other designers are so much better than me at implementing them. Some examples here of my favorites are I Cut You Choose or I Price You Choose. Rondel games, especially one-way time track games where you're kind of moving around either once around a circle or multiple times around a circle, choosing actions as far ahead as you want, like Cogito. That's an example of one of those. I love this style of games. Tug of War. I really love tug of war games like Watergate or Hanami Koji. I love those games, but tug of war is tough to design. Bag building I thought would be fairly easy to design because Quacks makes it look so easy, Quacks of Quedlinburg, but it's actually very, very difficult. Quacks and Orleans are some of my favorite games, but bag building, really tough to design around. And Push Your Luck. This is a surprising one because I would think Push Your Luck would be fairly, again, easy to design. I shouldn't use that word anymore though, because I have really struggled to make a Push Your Luck game. But I love that mechanism, and I'm fortunate that many other games exist with these mechanisms, and I'm just as much of a gamer, if not more so, than a game designer and game publisher. So I get to enjoy those games either way. So in terms of minimizing complexity when designing games, my thought process on it is that emergent complexity is completely fine. I'm not all that worried about limiting emergent complexity. What's important to me is the decision space that you actually have on your turn and the onboarding process itself. And so onboarding, a way to summarize the way I think about it is, how long does it take for you to learn a game or teach a game to someone before they can actually start taking turns, even if they don't understand the full game at that point? And you can see that in a lot of my game designs and the way that I teach games, or the way I talk about games. I try to give players a few core concepts that they need to understand to take a turn, but They don't need to understand the full aspect of the game yet. They just need to understand a few things, and they can start actually interacting with the game space. And from there, that's where the emergent complexity, I think, can be quite high. For example, in a game where all you need to know is that on your turn, you're playing a card. You play a card. This is how you play a card. That's all you need to know to actually take a turn. But the complexity that can emerge from the cards themselves can be huge. That can be a huge decision space. An example of that is Wingspan. In Wingspan, you only start out with a few cards in hand. Generally, only 4 actions that you need to take in Wingspan, and one of the first things you do in the game is typically play a bird. And so you need to understand a few things to be able to do that. But that's very easy. But the decision space on how you're building your engine over the course of the game, due to the sheer number of unique bird cards in Wingspan, that has a lot of complexity to it. It's like if I gave you the whole Wingspan deck from the first turn, that would be a lot of complexity to figure out which cards to play and which not to play. But instead, we give you a few cards and a few resources that streamlines the onboarding process and the decision space on your first turn and any given turn down to only 4 core actions. So that's what's important to me in terms of complexity. My favorite game that I designed, this is a question that's so tough for me to answer because really, truly, the answer is what you want to play with me of my games. I rarely actually suggest my games at game night. I wait for people to say, hey, I'm really in the mood to play Viticulture tonight. It doesn't happen all the time because my group, we play test games together, so they're probably tired of my games by the time that we get to actually just play them for fun. But also we play a lot of new to us games all the time. However, if one of them is in the mood to play one of my games, or if you, Maddie, if you were ever in the mood to play one of my games and we happen to be in the same place, that would be my favorite game to play at that moment, the one that you were excited to play or learn, either way. However, that's a bit of a cop-out for an answer. So I will say that one of the games that has pleasantly surprised me in terms of how much I've had fun with it, and probably the game that I've played the most in its published form, is Rolling Realms. Rolling Realms is a very easy game to play solo. And while I don't play the solo mode, I play Rolling Realms. I play it round by round, and I do live plays of it on Facebook Live, and then I post it on YouTube later. And I kind of do this partially as marketing, but I just have a lot of fun with it too, because it's so easy for me to sit down and try to solve the puzzle of playing a 10-minute round of Rolling Realms. I really enjoy it. I've played so many games of it, 30 games so far, 30 live play games, and these little bite-sized 10-minute round-by-round playthroughs. And I found I enjoy it far more than I ever thought I would enjoy essentially playing a game by myself. So I'll say kind of Rolling Realms. So does the connection between theme and mechanisms matter to me? And I would say, yeah, it matters a lot. It matters a lot for a variety of reasons. All of my games, even though not all the mechanisms in the game make sense thematically, I at least attempted to make them make sense thematically. And sometimes I have to cut things to make it more fun or more streamlined, more intuitive. But in general, I think a strong connection between theme and mechanisms matters a lot for teaching, for learning, for retention. That's a big one that I think we forget all the time. Because how many times do you play a game and then you set it aside, say you really enjoy it, then you set it aside and don't play it for a few months or a year, bringing it back to the table. If you have a strong connection between theme and mechanisms, it can be a lot easier to get that game back to the table. And also longevity. Well, the games that I play repeatedly over and over again for many years are often those games that have a strong connection between theme and mechanisms. Maybe, again, not every mechanism, but many of those mechanisms are the games that I seem to gravitate back to. I think the catch here, one little catch that I'll mention, is that there are some games that I think maybe take it a little bit too far. Like they're trying to capture every little aspect of the theme, and it ends up resulting in a lot of hard to remember rules, which I think defeats the purpose of having good theme and mechanisms. Like part of the purpose is making games easier to understand, easier to learn, easier to remember. But if the result of that is all these little rules to improve the simulation of the game, I think that can take away from the experience of having theme and mechanisms mesh together well. Thank you for saying that Stonemaier Games have high quality components. That is certainly something that we aim for. I believe that tabletop games are a highly visual and highly tactile experience. And so when I design a tabletop game, I really want to give players something fun to touch, to hold on to toy with, and to look at while they're playing. That's why we put a lot of our budget into the art, the graphic design, and the components themselves. Of course, we're also always looking to give gamers a good value. And so there are choices that we make in the publishing process. There's Walter walking behind me right there. There are choices that we make that might sacrifice certain components that could have been like super, super nice because we want players to still get the game at a reasonable price. So we make choices along the way. As a publisher, I make those choices. But I do try to make our games feel and look special. Even down to here, I have Rolling Realms right here. So Rolling Realms is just a roll and write game with dry erase cards. That with so few components, I still try to put a lot of thought into each of those components. So I tried to choose dry erase markers, for example, that weren't too small to hold in your hands, as many dry erase markers are. I tried to pick big, beautiful dice, these marbled dice that looked good on the table, that could be seen from across the table. So even with a very simple game, I think you can make fun design choices in terms of the components. So I always focus on 2 games at a time from a design perspective. As a publisher, I'm working on multiple games from development, project management, all that stuff. But as a designer, I really like to have 2 games going at all times, and ideally in different stages. I found that this really, really helps me stay engaged and excited about these games because at any given time, I can focus on the game that either that I'm more excited about at that moment and that can prevent me from getting burned out about the other game. And because oftentimes I'll be really excited for like a few weeks, and then I just need a little bit of a break, and I need to focus on something. I need to focus on something else, and that something else can still be productive because I have that other game to work on. So it can either be kind of emotional and psychological there in terms of why I have 2 games going at a time, but also because with 2 games in the works, if one enters blind playtesting for a few weeks, I can work on something else during that time, during that kind of dead period for the other game. So I really like to bounce back and forth between 2. I found that 3, even just 1 more, is too many for me. And so oftentimes it's the case where maybe I need to bring in a co-designer to work on an expansion, and I might lean on that co-designer a little bit for the expansion while I have these 2 other games going on. Or I might need to really try to finish one of the games so I can focus on something else and get that second project in the works at the same time. So, but 2 is the magic number I found for me. So luck in games. I actually really like variability in games. I like some randomness in games. And I don't mind games, as you can tell from some of my designs. A lot of my designs involve drawing cards blindly. And the choice isn't which card am I going to draw, which card am I going to select, but rather it's what am I going to do with the sheer number of cards that I have, and when am I going to play them? Which cards am I going to play, and when am I going to play them? I don't mind that type of luck in games because I think there's a lot of agency over what you're doing, which cards you're playing, and when you're playing them. For me, I think the key is that players have agency, that they have choices. So, and particularly agency over the output. I think a classic example here is if you're rolling dice, are you rolling them to determine the outcome, or are you rolling them first and then using those dice to determine the outcome? And that outcome might not be what you want it to be. If there's dice involved, there is luck. There's luck involved in what that output would be. You can still, say, fail a skill test if you're doing it that way. But saying, I'm going to try the skill test and then rolling dice and have the dice entirely determine the outcome is not something that I enjoy. I enjoy having a lot more, I enjoy knowing what that randomness is going into the agency that I have over the final outcome, or even the choice that I decide to make on that turn. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it for me is about choice and agency. Do players have a choice? And also I've even seen some games give players a choice between luck and something with less luck. And so they might choose between something that's certain, where they have full control over it, versus something that they don't have much control over at all, but they have maybe a higher risk-reward possibility there. I think that's really cool. I like to give players a choice there sometimes between luck and no luck. My advice for an aspiring game designer in 2022, there's lots of advice. I mean, I've been talking about advice here, but some things that I think about all the time for myself and that I think apply to other designers, even newer designers, are play a lot of games. I learn from so many games all the time that I'm playing. It's why I try to focus on my favorite mechanisms in games, because I learn things that I want to emulate, that I want to do better. I also, even though I don't talk about them publicly as much because I like to stay positive, I do notice things that I don't enjoy in games or moments of frustration, and I try to note that and try to eliminate those those types of frustration from my games. I also consume a lot of board game content. I can't play every game, but I can listen to what intelligent people who are way smarter than me, what they say about games and how they think about games, kind of like your game design channel. I love hearing what you all think about games and game mechanisms. I learn a lot from that. And even I oftentimes watch videos or read blog posts or listen to podcasts about games that I know really, really well, because I want to hear what people think about them. I want to hear what makes them happy about those games, what makes them frustrated about those games, so I can learn from that experience or their experience as a designer. I'm constantly trying to put myself in other people's shoes to see how they are experiencing games and experiencing the world in different ways than me, because I want my games to bring joy to a wide variety, a wide diversity of people. I think that's important. And last, one important thing for 2022 that I think is really, really important, because we have these cool tools these days like Tabletopia, where you can put your prototype on Tabletopia and playtest it at any time with anyone in the world. It speeds up setup. You can put all sorts of components on there. I think that is awesome. But the thing that I don't want to forget about in 2022, and that I would recommend that you don't forget about it, is that there are certain components that need to be tested on the tabletop itself. And I would say any game needs to be tested on the tabletop itself at some point and multiple points throughout the playtesting process. So despite how easy that technology is to use, or how easy it is to access and how great it is, I highly recommend that designers still test games on the tabletop, because you will see certain things that you think work well, because in the digital space, they seem like they work well, but on the tabletop, they actually don't work well at all in terms of how components are moving on the table, how they're fitting on the table, how often you're having to like shuffle the deck or slide cards over and around. Those moments of frustration sometimes are eliminated in digital versions, so I think it's so important to actually playtest on the tabletop itself. We do have some exciting things in store for us at Stonemaier Games. I can't reveal all of our secrets and surprises, but I can say that our 10th anniversary is coming up very soon in September. That's when Viticulture originally funded on Kickstarter back in 2012, and so that's our 10th anniversary, 10th birthday here at Stonemaier Games. So we have a bunch of surprises planned for the month of September. Also, one thing that I have announced is that Wingspan Asia is the newest expansion for Wingspan, and that should be ready in Q4 of this year, 2022, in case you're watching this in the future. We have Wingspan Asia. I haven't revealed many details about it yet, just that that's the continent for the new Wingspan expansion, and I've revealed one card so far, but I plan on revealing one card per month leading up to the announcement. I'm really looking forward to sharing more about that.
Thanks so much, Jamey, for taking the time to answer our interview questions. We've certainly learnt a lot and can't wait for what's to come with Stonemaier Games. We highly recommend checking out the links in the comments where you can learn even more from Jamey himself. We really hope you enjoyed this interview and found it useful. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you're liking our channel, please like this video and subscribe to show your support. And I want to give a big shout out to our loyal patrons who help us create these videos. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.